I've never read a zombie book where they come out of the zombie phase and remember
That's
what they
exactly what I
did
was going to
and what.
ask.
Wouldn't that be interesting if they come out of it, they remember how society treated them, they remember all the things they did as a zombie, and how would that affect them going forward? And so eventually in Immune, that's what happens. Two classes start to get formed. There's the Inflicted.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Molten Truth. As you know, I am your host, Zoe Michaels. And today we are talking with another one of our authors. This has been an interesting season because we started out with a lot of musicians, and now we're starting to roll our authors back into our mix. And it's going to be a fun season with just a variety of creative personalities. So tonight we get to speak with Seth. I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Voorhees. Is that right, Seth?
That's correct. Just like Jason from Friday the 13th, Voorhees. Yep.
You know what? I guess I never picked up on his last name.
I get that quite often, actually. I'll be in the store. If I show anyone my ID, they'll be like, oh, Voorhees, Jason, your cousin? And I'll be like, yep, absolutely.
I hear that, though. So I guess that immediately launches a thought in my head because you write dark fiction dystopian. Is that maybe part of the influence in that direction, having grown up with that last name and that, movie kind of lingering in the background, that character, or how did that come about that you just kind of went toward dark fiction?
Well, actually, how I didn't actually, it's not my original, it's my mom's maiden name. And I changed it in college, actually, just because I never knew my father in that side of the family. So the last name was actually Gregory for the longest time. Um,
Okay.
so, but as far as influence wise, yeah, that started way, way young of an age. Probably the farthest back I could think is, Goosebumps. We all remember the Goosebumps books. Those are my favorites. I
Yeah.
read those obsessively. I even wrote on a piece of paper, like, oh, if I created my own books, what would they be called? And I had this whole list of, I never wrote them yet because they were, I was young at the time and didn't have the real idea to how to actually write a book, but it was just a cool idea. And then I also remember in probably around fourth grade, I had a great friend named Paul, and we had a bad habit of when we spent the night at each other's house, mostly my house. We'd drink Mountain Dew and we'd stay up all night watching scary movies that we probably shouldn't have been renting. But, back in those days when you could rent a movie, you just walk up to the counter and the guy would be like, do your parents give you permission? You go, oh, yeah, absolutely. They don't mind. And they're like, oh, okay. And they didn't care. They just let you walk out the door.
Such
Video
different
stores, for those of
times.
you who remember them.
Yes.
Yeah, remember those? Yeah. Blockbuster and yeah.
Yeah.
Some people probably aren't going to remember those, but yeah, good times movies. But yeah, that was definitely the biggest influence was Goosebumps, and then just watching that stuff. Yeah, Friday the 13th was one of them. That was definitely when I saw Pet Cemetery at way too young of an age, and I remember that movie just scaring me. What is it with Zelda? I think it is the sister has the bad back, and it's just that scared me to death. That scene, it's still creepy. And I'm 40 now, but definitely that's how the influence started.
Yeah. So, at what point did you then begin to actually start developing your writing skills and decide that at some point you were going to be published? How did that journey work for you?
Yeah, so like I said, my journey started when I was young. When I was 18 in high school, I wrote my first actual novel, and I was doing it just more to see if I could, which I did. And I looked at it years later, and I was like, well, this wasn't a great story, but at least I tried. Tried my
Gotta
best. It
start
wasn't
somewhere.
until I know, right? For sure. It probably wasn't until about 7, 8 years ago, I want to say, maybe closer to 9, that I finally got into writing as an actual, think of it as actually something I could do for a career. Like, I've always enjoyed writing and I need to get back into it. So that's when I really started it. My first book, Immune, was the one I wrote. Basically, getting a thought off of The Walking Dead. Remember when The Walking Dead and Fear of the Walking Dead was like at its height? And I just remember watching an episode and going, I'd love to write about a zombie book, make it different than all the rest, because that's when everybody was writing about zombies. Like it was, it's kind of the cool thing to do at the time. And so yeah, I had to come up with creative ways to kind of get past the normal narrative that gets done exhaustingly to death. I was like, I gotta do something a little bit different. But yeah, once it really got into focus, I was like, I really would like to publish it. And I didn't know anything at the time. I'd heard about self-publishing, and that's the route I took. Still self-published, but eventually down the road, I'm hoping to go the traditional route as well.
Absolutely. So when you and I met a few weeks back, I remember you talking about, this was all pre-COVID. This was around the time of the
Yes.
swine flu 2016 that you kind of came up with this idea. So let's talk to the audience. Tell them about Immune, the ideas, that went into that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Immune was multiple ideas over a time that kind of just eventually gelled together. Yeah, so the original premise was, so I remember during swine flu, for those who remember it, it's been so long now, it feels so long ago. Um, and I remember going on a walk one day and just thinking, what if it'd be like if you were totally immune to some virus that caused so much destruction and was creating havoc around the world, and yet you were immune from it, so you were perfectly safe, you had no anxiety over it. But what would it feel like to watch everyone else who wasn't immune have to perish and die and survive? And what would that feel like? What would that journey um, be about, and how difficult would it be? And eventually I tied it into blood type A positive, which is my blood type, by the way. I didn't come up with that real creatively. It was just, oh, what's my blood type? A positive. Okay. So that's what I did. Those who are A, and that's how it is in the story. Those who are A positive are the immune. And so I told you earlier about just watching an episode of The Walking Dead and all of that. So I stuck with that swine flu idea. That was in my head for how many couple of years, because it wasn't until I think 2015, 16 is when I wrote Immune. And so swine flu was a little before then. So then when I did The Walking Dead, or thinking about zombies, so that's when that idea came to my mind, came back. My brain kind of just spit it out and said, "Hey, do you remember when you had this idea?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." So then I tied it in with that. And then as the story built and kept growing and growing, I had more ideas that just came to me, and I tied into them as well. Yeah, definitely the one.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, that's right.
I was going
I
to
just
say
want
the one great idea I had was just because I was saying I didn't want it to be like a normal zombie book. I wanted it to be different. So eventually I had the thought of how I've never read a zombie book where they come out of the zombie phase and remember
That's
what they
exactly what I
did
was going to
and what.
ask you.
Yeah, and that's how I came up with that. I was like, oh, wouldn't that be interesting if they come out of it, they remember how society treated them, they remember all the things they did as a zombie, and how would that affect them going forward? And so eventually in Immune, that's what happens. Two classes start to get formed. There's the Inflicted, and I know a lot of people are going to say, isn't it supposed to be Infected? I'm like, yes, it is, but we're going to call them Inflicted just for the sake of the fiction. But yeah, the group is the Inflicted and then the Immune, and then there's a lot of back and forth between how they interact with each other, treat each other. Eventually, the Inflicted get the edge, and they start rebuilding society at a much faster rate than the Immune do. Yeah, and it becomes a pretty good narrative. It just kind of kept going. I had to make some changes here and there, add some more characters as I went. Mm-hmm.
So, I hear this, and while I can tell it's a very different type of story, I feel like there's maybe some influences, maybe from like H.G. Wells, maybe some influences from, I forget who wrote like The Planet of the Apes, but I feel like there's like little bits of influence from those also types of stories, even though yours is very different in the important ways. Is that were they influential at all in your thought processes?
A little bit. Like I said, on top of The Walking Dead, obviously. One of the do you remember the movie Outbreak? Dustin Hoffman and
Yes.
Rene Russo.
Yes.
Yeah, that old movie. That was another one that just kind of helped influence, mainly from the military perspective. Because in the story, that's exactly what happens. One of the characters, secondary character named Helen, who is one of the Inflicted. That's the route she goes. She becomes kind of she starts her career at an internment camp for the Immune. They hold them there, and eventually she works her way up and eventually becomes the director of the organization. It's called the ICS, I believe, or ISC, that eventually replaces the CIA, and she becomes the director of it. And so she has to basically keep fighting with the Immune and at a different level of the government as the story progresses. And yeah, definitely that movie gave me that aspect and that thought for sure. I remember that movie. It was a good movie, Outbreak.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that one. I'm realizing that as I'm looking at your screen that I'm missing a letter to your website. And since I'm on the subject of your website, since I brought it up just inadvertently, let me just tell the audience, for those who don't have the visual, Seth does have a website. It is SethTVoorhees.com. For those who aren't sure how to spell Voorhees, it is V as in Victor, OORHEES.com. Hopefully you know how to spell Seth. And if not, just refer to the description under our broadcast. Anyway, just a side note there. But you've got, you said this was your first book, so that tells me you've got how many more books out there?
I have 4 currently right now. With the 5th I'm working on, but yeah, I have 4 right now.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about some of your work. Are they all this dark fiction dystopian, or do you have other genres?
Not dystopian. They are, I would say, yeah, each one's kind of different. I wouldn't even say they all fall under, I mean, definitely they don't fall under dystopian. So my next novel was The Interim. So that one was straight horror, I would say, definitely. So that one's about a cursed town. The idea that inspired that one was the 12th day of Christmas. And then I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if you had a 12 days of Halloween and kind of tie it into that? And eventually it turned into, I kind of talked about how I mix ideas together. So that was the original idea. And then while I was working on that, there was another idea I had just about this creature named Leopold, who I was writing about. And it started off with just scenes like him um, causing destruction here and there. And eventually I just tied the ideas in together, and it became about the town of Copper, South Dakota being cursed for 12 days out of the year. It's October 20th, I believe, to November 1st is how I have it in the book. And during those 12 days, he pretty much roams the town and kills anyone who steps out of the house, and animals too. So everyone has to kind of watch what they're doing. And slowly through the story, you find out why the town's cursed. And I think one of the big questions from that story came, why would you want to live there? Like, if that would happen, if 12 days out of the year was this horrible nightmare, why would anyone choose to live in the town? So I really had to come up with the idea of, okay, well, how am I going to get past that? Because if I was reading the book, that's the first thing I would ask. Be like, well, why? So I came up with, because of the rules that govern those 12 days, and because of how society has to protect itself and each other, they basically have no crime and no issues for the whole rest of the year. So the thought came, what would you do for utopia? Like, what would you do for a whole year of peace? Would you be willing to put up with 12 days of horror where you have to survive based on these rules that are 100 years old, and you find out the rules were who they were created by in the story? Would it be worth it just to live in peace for the rest of your life? And eventually the story unfolded with that thought, and it's about 5 youth who eventually form a bond and say, you know, we're tired of this, and they take charge and they fight Leopold over several interims. That's why it's called the interim, is because that's what that period is called in the town, is the interim.
Well, your description sounds like quite the tagline to grab someone's attention if they were reading like a synopsis on the back of a book. I mean, that would certainly grab a person's attention.
For sure. It was a good book. I liked it. That one, I might have actually, that one came out first before Immune. I think I said Immune was my first book. The Interim was actually my first. Immune was my second. So I have to correct myself on that one. Yeah. And then another one I have is called Midglow. That one is more historical fiction in a sense, but not quite. So it's based on, or in World War II, right before Pearl Harbor, that kind of in that time frame. And so that is about bank robbers. The main character's name is Philip, and he and his companions eventually discover that all the money they've been stealing from these banks all belong to the same person. And the person eventually catches them and basically extorts them and says, like, you know, you can either go to prison for the rest of your life or you work for me. And so Philip agrees, and then through that employment, and he goes to a hotel. I believe I said it in Kentucky, and he has to do all these odd jobs for the protagonist, whose name is Dr. Dracoon, is what his last name is. And so he eventually starts getting wrapped into this mystery about, why he's there, because he's a European gentleman, and, it's World War II, and it's kind of like, well, why is he here and not in Europe? And how is he able to do all this? How does he have this influence? And some of the small jobs are things like grave robbing and some more macabre things such as that. And eventually, he has to figure out the mystery. And he does, along with a few other of his ex-thieves who used to rob banks with him, because they get tied into it, obviously. They all three of them do. Maggie is one of the characters, and Peter is the other. But yeah, it's definitely... I tried to give it more of a mystery vibe. It was definitely my first time in that kind of crime mystery genre. But yeah, it's a very good story. I like it too as well. Definitely inspired wise, it was just mostly I just wanted to write a story about that time period. We kind of romanticize about that time period, even though it really was not a good time period to be alive around. It was very miserable, but we romanticize it. And so that's where that got started. And that's, it just started with the bank robbing scenes. That's usually how I work with my creativity and ideas. It starts with a scene, and then one scene will just build off another. And during that time when I'm not writing, if I have a story that's really good and it sticks with me while I'm doing something monotonous, like being on a treadmill or washing dishes, the next part will come to my mind. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's what happens next. That's usually what happens with me anyway.
Inspiration strikes when it strikes. You just hope you've got a pen and paper or a computer or somewhere to write it down quickly before it disappears from your mind.
Exactly.
Can't tell you how many times I was driving down the road and had to grab my phone and do a quick audio note or something just to make sure I didn't lose something that I wanted to hold on to. But yes.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then my fourth... Oh, sorry. Did you...
No. You're going where I was going to ask. Go for it.
So the fourth book, which just came out, it's called Question 17. So that one is dystopian. That is... So the main character's name is Corey. And he is a very successful young man who just graduated from what's called the academy. But they don't call them colleges. They call it academy. And so he gets an internship at a very secretive facility called the Willowlock. This story takes place 46 years after an alien invasion where Earth won the war. And we basically are rebuilding. Like, there's new nations, new countries, new rules to civilization, just all of that more interesting kind of science fiction storyline. And he eventually figures out that through by the end of the war, the government had a list of questions about the alien invaders. Stuff like, can we duplicate their technology? Can we drive their spacecrafts? Can we learn their language? Things like, such as that. And only one question remains, which is question 17. And so he goes through by becoming involved with the director and the higher ups in the facility, just what that question's about, what it means, how they're solving it, and eventually how it's going to affect his future and the future of the people on in the facility. And I don't want to give away too much, but
right,
basically
it's total story. I mean, it's a great title because it grabs what on earth is this question 17 and why is it so important? Because it's,
so that one's definitely more dystopian, more... I don't want to say horror because it's not horror, but definitely more science fiction towards there, which is why I tend to call myself a dark fiction author, because I can't really just say I'm a horror author because they're not all horror. So dark fiction kind of encompasses all of that, whether it be thriller, suspense, horror.
I get you. And I tend to bounce around genres, and I'm kind of still trying to figure out how to describe myself because the regular labels just don't seem to ring true. So one day Absolutely. I'll figure it out.
Right? I mean, we don't need to figure it out. We can just go with the flow. What's life without whimsy, right?
Well, exactly. And maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just a whimsy writer. I don't know.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that.
I like the idea of being able to write, one genre one time and write a completely different genre the next day. Variety of life, like in the kitchen. Who wants to eat Mexican every day for the rest of their life? How about some, Vietnamese, and how about some tie,
Well, that's right. Low variety.
variety.
Yeah.
And I think of writing the same way.
Gotcha.
I like the variety. And same thing when I read. But
Absolutely. I'm like that too.
talk to me about your influences. So, I mean, when you are the reader, when you are someone
Hmm.
who's enjoying books, who do you read? Who are your influences?
Like I mentioned earlier, with R.L. Stein, Goosebumps was the original. Obviously, Stephen King had an influence during my adolescence and later years. Currently, right now, the biggest influences I would say, well, one is Jennifer McMahon. I don't know if you've read her books. Very good. I love her story. She's definitely one where when a book comes out, I'm like, I'm buying it. I don't care what the reviews are. I'm not looking. I'm just buying it because she does a very good job. Another one would be Katrina Ward. I like her stuff as well. Darcy Coates, Rondell Melfi, uh, all of them inspire me. And I also do try to read a lot of nonfiction as well. Usually, when I read nonfiction, it is for some reason I love stories about shipwreck and survival and surviving on the islands and having to go through what they go through. Expeditions. I love those kind of stories when it comes to nonfiction. A little bit of history. I'll do some westerns here and there. The Old West. Yeah, definitely like Wyatt Earp and all those characters that definitely had their own little niche in life and how they took care of things on their own. Definitely, so I do try to read both nonfiction and fiction because I think they both help out. I wouldn't say I have the genres. I don't have a lot of favorite authors in right now. I would say is romance. I don't read a lot of romance. I've read Colleen Hoover. I've liked her books. Some of them they are pretty good. So I don't. I try to read as much as I can. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of authors who inspire me. But I'd say Jennifer McMahon definitely. Whenever I read her books, I'm like, oh, that's really good. I need to remember that. But then also too, I feel like you can get a lot from the books you don't enjoy either, not just the ones you
True.
do. Hmm.
If nothing else, oh, I don't really like that approach, and I know to steer clear of that, or maybe they have a great approach, but you don't necessarily like their story. But yeah, we can
Hmm.
definitely learn from them. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I try to be very open minded when I read and I don't like a story. I'm like, because I don't know about you, but I have a bad tendency to be like, you know what, I would have wrote this differently. This is what I would have done. And that's like, well, it's not your book, Seth. It's not about you.
I get you. Yeah, I have a hard time too. When I pick up something, I like to be able to finish it.
Okay.
Only maybe once in my life have I not finished a book, and eventually I did finish it, but it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah.
I put down that
Okay.
book probably 5 times before I finally got up and got past that first chapter, but it took
Oh,
a
all right.
while. But
Uh,
I like to be able to finish a book, so I like to know before I even start the book, am I going to like this book?
mm-hmm.
So I do a
Yeah.
little bit of homework in advance because hopefully you like the personality. And usually, if I like an author's book, then I will go looking for more of that author because
Mm-hmm.
once you've got a good track record, okay, I feel safe, getting more of your books.
Absolutely. I will sometimes do research. I'll read the reviews. I like to pay more attention to why they didn't like it, though. I usually skip a lot of the other stuff that's in the review. I just want to know why you didn't like it, if you didn't like it. Um,
Right.
I definitely, though, it depends on where I lose interest if I put a book down. If
Mm-hmm.
I lose interest, but there's only like maybe 100 or less pages left, I'll kind of slog through it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm pretty generous with books. I feel like I give them usually about the first 110, 125 pages if it's a
Yeah.
novel. But if I'm not interested at all and I really don't enjoy it, then I put it away. I'll
Yeah.
go read another story. But it's been rare. I don't. It doesn't happen very often. I'm usually a pretty good sport. I can keep a book going or can have pretty good interest. It takes a lot for me to go, okay, we're done.
Right. Exactly. I feel like depending on the book, you have to give at least the first 2 or 3 chapters. Let them set the scene. Let them set up the story. You know, if they haven't set up the story within the first 2 or 3 chapters, maybe something's wrong.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
but by then you should have a good sense of whether or not it's going to be a good story. And 9 times out of
Hmm.
10, 9.5 times out of 10, it's a good story. You
Yeah,
know.
Absolutely.
So
Are you picky about endings, or do you want it just to be satisfying? Like it doesn't matter if it's happy or not, as long as it's satisfying, then you're good with that.
yeah, I think that's where I would come from. I like a satisfying ending. If you're gonna give me a cliffhanger where I have to wait for a second book, make it a good one.
Right.
Make
Absolutely.
it worthwhile. If I know there's a cliffhanger in advance, I will wait for the second book to come out, so I don't have to wait
Right.
too long. There was a author, Bella Forrest. I forget how I stumbled on her books. I think she was recommended to me, and all of her books, it was like 6 parts for the entire story. And thank goodness all of her books were out, because no sooner did I get to one, I was like, oh, but I need to know.
Yeah.
Which is a
Right.
good sign, right? That to me, that's a good author. Like,
That
okay.
is for sure.
So thank goodness she had all of her books out, because I would have gone crazy waiting like a year for the next book. I want to
Right.
know now.
You just wanted to learn. Absolutely, I agree.
I'm
Absolutely.
I'm not patient enough to wait for a whole year for you to get me the next installment. I want
Right.
now.
You want it now? Get it done. Absolutely, I agree with you completely on there. They don't wait too long for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
I'm not too bad with endings, like I said, as long as it's satisfying. The only thing I'll admit I'm kind of a stickler with is I don't like if they kill the main character at the end. Even if it satisfies some greater purpose, or like, with their death they've accomplished this internal peace or habit or whatever. I still don't like it. Don't kill the main character though. That's the only ending that bothers me most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable, but again, if you have to do it, try to do it in the most satisfying way possible. Make it
Mm-hmm.
make sense.
Yes.
And especially if you're, in my mind, unavoidable would be like your historical fiction or something based on historical type thing. Hopefully, it's avoidable if you're writing fiction and it's, you're creating the world. Hopefully, it's avoidable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, but so you said you have another book that you're working on.
Mm-hmm. Currently, yeah. It's going through the editorial process right now with my
And
editor. Yep.
is
One more.
that the thriller, or what type of genre is the one that's coming?
I would say it's more suspense thriller. Absolutely.
Suspense thriller.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very, though it is kind of more, I would say maybe more crime too as well. Because there are some crime and mystery in it. So it's called Cottonwood. It's called the Cottonwood Prestige.
Okay.
So it's about a young man named, ooh, I just lost his name. Anyway, okay, it'll come to me.
It'll
I'm
be a
thinking of
surprise.
his father Templeton, because their last name is Baker. Oh, Eugene. There we go. Eugene and his father Templeton, who is not doing really well health wise, and he lives with his grandfather Gerard, and so he gets this basic message saying, "Hey, your father's not going to last much longer. You need to come back to town," and because he doesn't, and the town's in Michigan, and West Carlton is what the town's called. And eventually, what you discover is that all three of them are part of this giant fraternity called the Albatross, and it's still active in the college there, but yet the alumni control almost all everything around the city and the county. Very powerful organization, a lot of influence in all political and law and all that stuff. And eventually, while he's there, Eugene taking care of his father, all these deaths start happening, and all the members are members of the Albatross, and it's all very suspicious and weird. And the detective in charge, whose name is Daryl, he's also a member of the Albatross. So you just start learning about this organization and some of its members who are not good people, especially some of the ones who wind up dying. I don't want to obviously give up too much. Eugene just basically gets sucked into this mystery about what's going on. Why is all of a sudden this organization being targeted, and why is he, getting drugged back into this with his father and his grandfather? And you start learning some of his backstory, where there's, he was a member back in college of the Albatross, and he has some skeletons in his closet as well. And so that's basically the main gist of the story, is solving that mystery of what's going on.
Sounds good. So, when you go through your writing process, like how long does it usually take you from the time that you first think of the story that you want to tell to the writing and then gain it to your publisher? Like what's the length of time it usually takes for you to get from start to finish before your book comes out?
So I'm not a plotter. I don't structure everything ahead of time. Like I said, I'm more of a seat on my pants, go by the seat of my pants and just write. I try to keep up with a writing goal of 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. Try my best anyway. You know how life is. Sometimes you can't get it done, but I do my best. And usually you can get, 70, 80,000 um, word draft in about 3-4 months if you stick to that goal. So that's usually how long the writing process takes, just the first draft, just to clarify, just because I just write and just kind of, like I said, go on the seat of my pants. Then there's the editing. So what I like to do is I go through 3 drafts. I will edit it 3 times before I decide to send it to my editor, just to kind of clean it and polish it, make it look as pretty as I can. But the reason I do 3, because I've heard some people, I've heard some interesting things. Like some people say they go over it 60 times or 10 times or 9 times, and I'm like, oh my goodness. For me, the reason I do 3 is just because by the 3rd time, I'm no longer seeing anything. If
I was
that
gonna
makes sense.
say you're blind to
Mm-hmm.
it after a point. I'm blind to
Yeah.
it after 3 times for sure.
Yeah. So then that's when I give it to my editor. My editor then goes through it. That process, depending on what I can afford, um, may take a few more months. So usually it's about a year, I'd say, at least, before it really gets to the publisher. Now things have changed a little bit with in regards to publishing. I've actually gone through several publishers with my books. These 4 currently, other than Question 17, sorry, the other 3, they're all on second editions right now, because all 4 of them are published through Ingram Sparks Publishing. I was kind of late to the ball game about hearing about their publishing company, which is good because they have the that buyback option in order to get your books into bookstores. For your audience who don't know, Ingram is like the most popular distributor in the country, and so basically, I'm taking the place of the publisher by going through them through their self-publishing. But anyway, yeah. So my first book, The Interim, was through Archway Publishing, who was with Simon and Schuster. They're kind of attached to them. That came out in 2017 or 16. And then Immune was with Written Dreams Publishing. It was another publishing company in Wisconsin, Green Bay, actually. And Midglow was also contracted through them, but it never got published at that point. So while I was working on Question 17, what actually wound up happening is with Red Dreams Publishing, there was just some other outside things going on with the organization. And eventually I got the rights back to those 2 books. And then at the same time, I was sitting there going, I'd really like to get the buyback option for those 2 books, as well as Question 17, because Question 17, I was looking for a publisher at the time. And then I heard about Ingram Sparks. I'm like, okay, I'm going to publish through them. And I'm like, well, if they get the buyback option, I should do it to Midglow and Immune as well, since I just got the rights back to them. And then I thought, well, what about The Interim? So I got in contact with Archway Publishing and said, hey, is there any way I can get that buyback insurance or option? They go, no. And I'm like, well, can I get my book back then? And they said, oh, yeah, no worry. Here, fill out this form, which is way more easier than I thought it was going to be. I was like, okay. So I wound up getting the rights back to that book as well. So now all 4 of them, like I said, I published them all within about 2-3 months through Ingram Sparks Publishing. I kind of reviewed them and went through them again and just did second editions. And then, like I said, this 5th book, I'm actually hoping I want to try and go the traditional route with that one and go through with agents. I've done that process before with Immune before I published it with Ingram Sparks. But yeah, that's my next goal, is to get the traditional route.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be curious to hear about your journey where that's concerned with the literary agent and all of that. Because, I mean, the nice thing about self-publishing is that you're not waiting for permission. You just, you get it published and get it going. But there's so many advantages I've heard about with having an actual literary agent. So far, I'm still in the self-publishing camp. But I've been keeping my ears open and talking to different ones.
Yeah, both have their plus and minuses, and from the people I've heard, some people say, well, just stick with self-publishing, and just some people say, yeah, but, traditional is nice as well, just because self-publishing is expensive. It's
It
spendy.
is. It
So the
absolutely
process
is.
moves a little slower. As much as people say, well, it's faster. It's like, well, not really when you can't afford a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Pluses and minuses, you just have to make the decision. And the truth is, you could end up spending a lot more money self publishing, especially if you don't know who to trust. There's
Right.
so many places out there that will try to take advantage, calling themselves publishers, and
Absolutely.
they're not publishers at all. They're
Absolutely.
what? Wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
They try and just get some money out of you. But if
Exactly.
Conwood doesn't get through, if it winds up not going the traditional route, then I'm going to publish it through Ignorm, just like I did the other one. So that's my plan. So that's the backup.
Absolutely. And that's just the thing. At least there are some solid routes to get it done. Thank goodness for Ingram
Right.
Sparks, and I think Lulu and
Mm-hmm.
when in doubt Amazon, but Ingram Sparks I do know is the biggest. So yeah, it works.
Yeah. Free
So
plug. Send me a check. No.
so aside from your website,
Mm-hmm.
does the Ingram Sparks are they putting your books actually in the bookstores, or is it online only that people find your books? How are people finding your books?
Currently, currently they're just online. Like if you go to Barnes and Noble,
Mm-hmm.
Books a Million, any bookstore that you're a fan
Mm-hmm.
of, you can just go
Mm-hmm.
online and get them, and Amazon
Yeah.
obviously as well.
Mm-hmm.
I am reaching out and working on getting them in bookstores. I do have a bookstore currently in Rapid City. That's where I live. Monarch Bookstore. They have my books. They just got a Barnes and Noble open. It hasn't been open for very long, July. So I am working on trying to get my books into that one as well. So I am working on getting them into bookstores for sure. I do have a
Sounds
publicist and he's helping me out with that as well. So that is the plan, is to get them more into bookstores. But at least you can at least order them. So if you don't see it, you can walk up to your clerk at any Barnes and Noble or whatever bookstore you had and say, "Hey, can you order this book for me?" Yep.
That is the beauty of
That's the
it,
next process.
absolutely. And then of course all the indie bookstores. Thank goodness for those as well. Um, so we're at the point in our program where we pull out the random question from the previous
Oh,
guest.
okay.
So the previous guest wanted to give you kind of a hypothetical situation. So he said that imagine that you are on a highway. And as you exit the highway, you notice that there is a car sitting there on the side of the road with its hood up. There's a lady looking down into the engine. Do you stop or do you keep going? And why?
That's an interesting question. Um, that's good. I think it, well, probably depends on the highway. Do you say highway or interstate? Highway?
Yeah, he said you exited the highway. Probably, yeah, for the exit or ramp or however you want to visualize that.
Right. Okay. Um, I think, for me, it depends on where we're at. If it's the middle of absolute nowhere, I might pull over just to check and say hi. If it's a really busy highway, we're in a very big city area where there's a lot of people, I might not, just because I'm probably thinking, well, maybe they already have someone. Um, I want to try and answer that without sounding like a jerk. um, yeah, that's a
These
interest.
days,
It just depends on, because these days it's so hard to really answer that. 20 years ago, yeah, I do live here in the Midwest, and we are usually pretty good about helping each other out and trying to help if it looks like a situation that's stuck. Now, if it was a blizzard and I was driving home and she was pushing her car and struggling, I might get out and help. Just
yeah,
because you're in the middle of a blizzard, it's cold. If it's a nice, warm, sunny day, maybe not. That's, yeah, a hard question to answer right now, I think, these days, because a lot of people also don't want help. I don't know if you've noticed that.
there's that
A lot of
factor,
people just
or
want
there's
to do it
even
on their
this
own.
possible safety issue because maybe she's not alone, maybe it just appears. Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many scenarios.
Well, and there's, yeah. And safety was the other one I was thinking, because I
Mm-hmm.
have a vivid imagination. They might be just trying to con me out as getting out of the car or something.
Yeah.
I would say I'm probably more apt to help a guy if I see them and they're struggling, just because I think I can relate more, if that makes sense. I don't know. Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a good
It is an
question. I don't
interesting
know.
question. Yeah, because I even have to ask myself, would I even stop? And I think in my case, I might I might have to maybe stop further down, maybe call someone, like a local police, maybe someone to help them, someone who's going to take the right
Yeah.
precautions. Yeah, don't think I would want to leave
Right.
them stranded if they legitimately need help, but I wouldn't want to take the risk because of safety. But I had to think about that one
Well, then I'm
myself
not a.
because there's too many factors. You just don't know.
There are. Well, I'm not a mechanic, so really, I'm not going to help you anyway. I can't. I'm not going to be able to help you because I don't know what I'm doing. So that's part of why I might drive away too, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. She might have a boyfriend or a husband or a dad who's coming, and they're way more intelligent than I am. So never know. Yeah, as well. And
True.
also too, I'm very. I think I'm very cautious of the fact, or not cautious. Well, I am cautious, but I'm also very aware of the fact that, and I think maybe it's because I've worked residential settings for so long. I'm very aware of the fact of being a white male with a beard. Um, there's a lot of like, oh, I don't want that guy coming near me. You know, there's so many times where I've worked with youth and they're like, you remind me of a police officer in town. You remind me of an uncle who I didn't like. You remind me of, so I'm very conscious of aware of just the fact of me being a white male. That might actually make them more nervous. That might actually make her more scared. She may not want me to come across. One of the most humbling experiences I have is with my current job. We have a lot of grant conferences and events that we have to do, and they're always in the South. They're always in the South, which is great because it's very humbling to be the person in the room and be the minority. When you're the white male being the minority, and 9% of that room is having issues where it's like, okay, historically my people created all this, so but even when they're friendly and helpful, you can tell there's always a little bit of wanting to be a little distant from me just because I'm sure there is personal experience. So I think that factors in a lot of too of why I might not help her out
Yeah.
or even him, just
Yep.
because of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's just a lot of factors, and I really can't imagine anyone in our audience faulting you because I had to think, like I said, I had to think about that myself. It's just so many factors, safety being foremost among them.
Yeah.
But
Well, nowadays, when you scroll through TikTok, I could see a lot of people, uh, females saying, "Well, I'm strong, independent woman. I don't need your help. I don't want your help. So go away." It's like, oh, okay.
well, and most people have a cell phone, so there's usually a
Yeah,
way to
for
call
sure.
for help. 9 times out of 10, there might be that 10th one who doesn't, or their phone might have died, or who knows what. But hopefully, no one's really without help if they want it. And let's face it, there are situations where people stage something like that where a crime could take
Yep,
place.
absolutely.
So did you have a question for our next guest?
I did. So mine was, so I got to read it here. Sorry, hold on. Okay, if
That's
you
fine.
picture your mind as a museum, what would all of the exhibits look like? Like, would you
Interesting.
have an exhibit for your imagination, your creativity, your anger, your emotions? Would you have it for your family, your academic life? But what would those exhibits look like? What would the museum in your mind portray if we just walked into your brain and stepped into it? Sorry, that was a long question. I could
That's an
slow it down a
interesting
little bit.
question, though. Just like to sit there and visualize that question. I mean, that's like something out of a cartoon. I mean, the visualization of that. I mean, that's amazing. So I'll go back later and replay this, and I'll write that down proper. But I've got the gist of it. So,
Okay.
but very cool. Thank you for that. Our next person, I'm sure they'll enjoy visualizing that question as much as I enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing how they'll. If I hope that they'll do that question justice and really maybe describe at least one exhibit. That'd be so cool if they do. Okay,
Do
So
you
as
think
we get ready to
Inside
wrap
Out?
up,
Remember the movie Inside Out? Sorry.
yes, I just watched that the other day because sometimes in my job there's kind of down quiet periods of time, so I do research, I do other things, but sometimes I just have like a little video thing, and Inside Out was one of the things I played the other day, so I just watched that. Um, but yeah, anyway, neither here nor there, but you mentioned it. So as we wrap up, do you have any last things you might want to share with our audience? Any last thoughts? Any advice? Any kind of anything at all?
Anything else? I mean, yeah, like I said, if you have a hard time finding my website, there's a bookstore on the website where you can order my books from there. And like I said, if you can't find them, go online and try to get them. Go to your bookstore and see if you can order them. Order them off Amazon, obviously. And I really would love it if they, encourage their own bookstores to carry my books as well. Obviously, I can't contact every bookstore in the country and talk to them. So the more they go out, that'd be great. So word of mouth is excellent. I do have some social media pages, so you can find me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, where I do try to advertise my books there as well. So you can see me there. But yeah, advice, like writing advice, I go with it's kind of boring and old, but if you want to be a writer, you got to read a lot and write a lot. That's kind of what everyone says: read a lot, write a lot.
So true.
Don't and play. I've always found I don't know if you're like this too, but I always hear people say, "Well, what if you have writer's block? What if there's that day where you just don't have anything? Then what do you write about?" And it's like, well, play games and do write. I like to go by the alphabet. Like I'll be like, A is for absolute. I have absolutely none to write about today. Today is a boring day, and just go through the whole alphabet until you get your word count. Like not every day has to be a grand masterpiece. So just do it. I like to think of it as like my imagination and creativity is like my body, and we have exercise and nutrition. Well, that's what reading and writing is for the imagination. It's just exercise and nutrition.
Absolutely. It's probably the mental equivalent of a piano someone who plays the piano doing the scales. They just keep limber and playing the scales, then gets them ready for whatever music they either play or potentially compose. So there's probably a comparison
Absolutely.
there. But very cool. Really good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wrap this up, and just thank you again for being
Yeah.
here.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Welcome.